So hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here, and I'm just here at the large rock outside the Pavitakuti and thought to record a short Dhamma discussion for the internet. So I thought that maybe we could start with just a little meditation, so we can lean forward a bit and arch the spine and look about 3 feet in front and close our eyes. And can focus in on the breath. Can know when it's coming in and know when it's going out. If we breathe in a long breath, can just know I'm breathing in a long breath. And if one breathes in a short breath, can just know I'm breathing in a short breath. And can focus in on the breath at the tip of the nose. And when watching the breath at the tip of the nose, it can be good to make one's awareness as continuous as possible. Being aware all the way through the in-breath. As the in-breath turns to the out-breath, all the way through the out-breath, and as the out-breath turns back to the in-breath again. Trying to keep mindfulness as continuous as possible. And if the mind wanders off to the past or the future, you can just bring it back to the present moment, to the breath. And before we finish meditating, can spread thoughts of goodwill, wishing may all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make the mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. And can open our eyes and do a short Dhamma discussion for the internet. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Ditiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Ditiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Ditiyampi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. So hope that everybody's keeping well wherever it might be, and was discussing with somebody a while back about food, and one of the questions that was brought up was basically, how does one relinquish one's attachment to food? So the Buddha's teachings on reducing the desire for food, they can be categorized in at least two ways. One of them is this way of basically restraining the senses when one goes out. So when one kind of goes out and sees things that one likes, sees kind of, ice cream in the supermarket, or if one is a monk and one sees one's favorite food on the table, whatever it might be, then one has to pull back and restrain the senses. And when taking that food, basically asking oneself, is this good for my body or not? There can be a certain amount of things that are good for the body, and eating some fats and eating some sugars, these kind of things. Sometimes some can be good, healthy for the body. So one has to pay attention to the effect these things are having on the body, and also pay attention to the mind. One of the things with reducing one's desire to consume food is that oftentimes people use food as an escape from the present moment, as an escape from whatever is going on in their mind at that time. So if one has a lot of stress, one might crack open a bag of chips and eat the chips. Or maybe if one is a monk, one might drink too much gilampasa. They call it kind of these teas and things that are allowable in the afternoon for monks. So to the extent that one is using food to distract oneself from any problems that arise in one's daily life and whatever one is dealing with during the day, this is actually probably one of the biggest difficulties in trying to relinquish attachment to food, one of them. And it's because whatever painful things one is covering up with the food, they reemerge if one starts to try to limit the amount of food one takes, or limit the intake of food in particular situations. And so one has to basically learn to restrain one's senses in this situation. But if this is the case, one also has to have a sense of what it is, like what situations are arising that cause one to want to distract oneself with food. And if this is the case, then one has to basically address the underlying causes of one's desire to distract with food. That's on a pretty gross level. One wants to make sure that one isn't using food to cover up whatever problems one might have. So basically, in doing that, one has to look to the rest of the Buddha's teachings to see what the counters are for whatever particular defilement it is that one is trying to distract it from. If it's worry or fear, anxiety, these kind of things. And one wants to make sure that one is going through the day grounded in the present moment. If one is a lay person, and there may be other considerations too. Sometimes people are very worried about money. The Buddha's recommendations for money is not to have any debt. So also one can try to learn to restrain oneself in one's spending so that one's spending doesn't exceed one's income. If one is a monk and one is kind of alone and thoughts of worry or whatever it might be come up and one wants to distract with food, then one has to learn to restrain and to gain a certain amount of reliance on one's meditation topic. Especially that it's recommended by some teachers to cultivate breath meditation if worry is coming up. But one of the main topics for dealing with food is actually, the Buddha recommends, the main one, I guess one could say, is contemplation on the loathsomeness of food. So can discuss kind of attachment to food on the, I guess one might say, like more gross levels, like one just knows one has his favorite food and one likes to eat a lot of it because it's tasty. And then maybe one is distracting oneself with food. But on the more subtle level, there's actually a delusion involved in the consumption of food. And that delusion is that the food is something really beautiful and really tasty and really attractive. So one of the interesting things is that one can see if one really anticipates eating this food, then, looking forward to it, one bites into the food. Where's one's mind when one's biting into the food? It's usually not on the taste of the food. It's usually off somewhere else. So what one really tends to crave with the desire for food is this overwhelming sense stimulus that distracts one for at least a few moments. One gets a few moments peace because one is not worried or thinking about much else, and one's mind can kind of go off for a little bit. And then it has to come back. So when one learns to pay attention to it in this way, one learns to see, wait a minute, this food that I'm eating it's not necessarily the tastiness of the food that I'm really craving. It's this kind of distraction. And behind this distraction is avidya. It's kind of this lack of desire not to really see what it is that makes one happy and what it is that makes one suffer. So the Buddha recommends for a counter, one of the counters for this is this contemplation on the loathsomeness of food. This is the main topic he recommends to counter one's desire for food. And think about it, food is made up of all these things that we see growing. If we get any food on our clothes, in one day that food is really smelly and disgusting. Or if anybody, if monks, we have to take out compost or whatever it might be, the food a day after it's been served is really smelly, really disgusting. Especially when one sees it in the compost pit days afterwards, there's often these kind of like maggots living there and bugs crawling all over it. So one can go out and take a mental image of that, kind of, stare at it for a while, take a snapshot, and then keep it in mind. This is the future fate of this food. And then what was the food like previous to this? It would have been a bunch of different ingredients, and would that have been something really tasty or not? It's when it all comes together for this brief moment that it seems really tasty. And then, why is it so tasty like that? Is it the taste? Because if one takes the food and chews it up and then spits it out again and looks at the food, it's something really, really disgusting. But actually in one's mouth, when one's eating it, it's all mixed together like that. It isn't separated and, with all this nice looking things to it. So one can try to attack the delusions around food this way. Okay, wait a minute, I'm chewing this food, it's got my saliva in it, I'm looking at it, it's completely disgusting. Why is it so disgusting, Or what about this food in 1 hour and 2 hours? It's so disgusting. Why do I have this desire for it? Why do I have this desire to eat and consume this food? Now, one of the things is that in order for the body to maintain itself, it needs a certain amount of nutrition. So there's this reasonable desire to it, but kind of skimming on top of that desire is this craving. This craving for to use food as a means of distraction. So one has to learn through using these kind of exercises to try to separate what it is the body needs to survive and is healthy for it to keep going from where the craving is in this. Where it is this just desire to blank out from the taste of the food. And then one has to learn to restrain oneself from this. And so learning to try to develop wisdom in these ways, always has this element of sense restraint. One learns to pull the mind back more and more and more and cultivate perceptions to the opposite more and more and more. And what kind of does this eventually is, why is this the case? This is the kind of path that leads to, that can lead to the stopping of these things, as the Buddha teaches us. So in order to counter one's desire for food, one can take on these strategies. That is to restrain one's senses around, the cravings that people know and how they have for their favorite foods. Just not kind of taking it and indulging it because one needs, taking it with the thought, is this good for my body or not? And then one can also try to stop oneself if one is ever using food for distraction. Kind of got to stop that. If one is using food for distraction, then that can lead to a number of health problems. And then the third thing is to try to cultivate these perceptions to the opposite. Try to see what it really is the mind wants when it's craving for this food. Does it really want the food, the taste of the food, or does it really want this distraction? And one can focus in on the taste. It's just salty, it's spicy. It's actually not that satisfying. Even when focusing in on the taste in one's first bite of the food, there's still hunger there. So it's not even that satisfying of a moment. The mind just wants to be off at that time. One can focus in on the loathsomeness of the food. Why is it that I crave this food so much? It's kind of, if I got it on my clothes right now, it'd be something really disgusting. If I took 2 bites and spit it out, it would be really disgusting, even though that was just in my mouth. Nothing wrong with it health-wise. So in all these ways, one can start to try to take away the delusions of food so that one doesn't have to suffer from craving for something that isn't helping, craving for something that's unnecessary, and that links up with other desires that link up with other disappointments. So one can try to separate one's desire for the food for the health of the body from the desire for food for craving. And this is something that the Buddha recommends in order to try to move forward on the path to Nibbana. Okay, so leave that for reflection, and wishing everybody all the blessings of Dhamma practice.